Hello, my name is Charlie Loyd. I'm on the MapBox Satellite team, and at MapBox we make maps. For example, satellite maps. All of this data is from open data. This comes from not gigapixels but terapixels of data that NASA put online and we processed. Another map is our street map. I think I'm having caching trouble. We take OpenStreetMap data, we distill it down to a reasonable subset, things that people want to see on a general purpose map, and we put that out. Both of those are completely open data based. But those are only the headline maps. We're really about many, 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 many maps, tens of thousands of maps. For example, the Financial Times' map. They wanted a map that was pink because that's their trademark color. So we made them a map that was pink. But it's not just about the color, it's also about what they want to show. Financial Times is interested in economics and politics, so it's a very economics and politics-oriented map. It shows borders very clearly. It shows the exclusive economic zones on the maritime borders there. It's what they want to see on their site. A.J. Ashton, one of our cartographers, just made this map that I just adore. That's outdoor-oriented. It's for everything you want to do outdoors. Running, skiing, cycling, kayaking. It's kind of the opposite of the Financial Times map. It shows terrain. It doesn't show borders. You don't care where the county line is on your jog, right? Ian Vieta, another one of our cartographers, made this label layer for our satellite map. When you're looking at your satellite data, you want a different kind of labeling. If you had this, like this much data just composited on top of the satellite, it would look like garbage. You wouldn't be able to see either the satellite data or the map labels. So Ian made these very simplified labels that I just really like. I can't get enough of these. Sometimes you want to map something that doesn't exist. The Silent History is this project that uses these maps to tell a story. They're maps of the real world. They're also fiction. So really, it's not about this map or this map. It's about your map. So hang on. Why do we care about location? Like, why are we all here thinking about location? Location by itself is kind of nothing, right? What location is context. It's what connects you to something else. Your location doesn't matter on its own. It only matters in relation to some other location. The location of another person, a place, something you can do, some danger, some fun, something, right? Just the latitude and longitude does nothing. Why does open data matter? Because you can find things. Because it's not what's fed to you, it's the whole thing, the whole smorgasbord of everything that anyone thought was worth writing down. Anything anyone thought was worth putting on the map. You can find it, and you can filter it down to be not an overall map, right, that shows something like we thought you would want to see, but your map that shows what you want to see. Because there's just too much data out there to see at once. That's why filtering matters. So something that I know we all know here, but I have to remind myself of constantly, is that open data is necessary but not sufficient, right? Open data on its own, sitting on a server, does nothing. Open has to be accessible. It has to be something you can actually use. Not someone can use, but you can use. And the data has to become information. It has to have meaning and connections to other kinds of information. OpenStreetMap is wonderful at this. OpenStreetMap is fantastic at this, right? It's taking all this data, things like satellite imagery, which is not interpreted, it's just a bunch of pixels, right? And it's turning that into not just one kind of information, but many, many, many kinds of information. Information about where people live, information about what kinds of buildings there are, about the land itself, about rivers, about mountains, anything people want to put on there. So it's a map of what people care about. It's wonderful. The London-based conceptual artist James Bridle had this wonderful line in an interview somewhere. Someone asked, "What's your favorite piece of literature?" And he said, "The internet." My favorite screensaver is this thing called Show Me the Way, which takes OpenStreetMap edits from a minute ago. This is live, this is real, 2 minutes ago, a minute ago, and just shows them. It just animates the lines being drawn. It draws them faster than people actually drew them, of course. It's kind of in fast forward. But this is real data, really coming in right now. And the scale of this is amazing to me. I can just sit here and watch this all day. We have this up on a dashboard in our garage, and like if I'm just kind of stuck on a problem, I'll just be like, people working. You can see people mapping in the Philippines right now, right? People laying out the highways. Someone's been doing this big project in Mexico, Philippines again. It's hypnotic. It's wonderful. So there are two really amazing things about this to me. One is the scale, knowing that thousands and thousands of people are working on this, and there's this amazing growth curve. Like every month, it's hundreds more people signing up and getting involved. So there's just this kind of like horizontal scale that's fascinating. What's also amazing to me is the timeliness, is the fact that this is happening right now, right? That this is part of someone's experience. I was going to say in the Balkans, but I don't know if they actually live there. It could be, they could live somewhere else. They could be tracing this because they want to, because they vacationed there, because their family comes from there. I don't know their story, but they do, and they're living it on the map. So watching this is watching the picture of the world as it changes, like communal knowledge about where things are as that knowledge grows. And that's really, really inspiring to me. So, how can we make OSM better with a new editor? How can we make an editing tool that somehow reflects this, expands on this, encourages this? We have to make it accessible. And accessible means it has to work for someone who's encountering it for the very first time. And we've just heard that that seems to be working, so I'm very proud for my coworkers who made it. But it also means accessible to old computers. Because, like I have a MacBook, and it's not the best MacBook, but it's a great computer, and it does everything I want. But many, many people, especially in areas where the priority is highest to map, don't have a nice computer. They have, a hand-me-down. It's not working super great. They have to have something usable. And there are many excellent OpenStreetMap editors that are really good tools, but they're tools for experts. And we're really interested in uptake, in recruitment, in bringing more people in turning them into experts in a year, but turning them into mappers today. So this tool has to be very simple. And so Richard talked about that, which means saying no to a lot of good ideas, right? You can't have an editor that has every bell and whistle. You have to be able to draw the line and say, that would be a useful feature. Editors should have that feature available. This editor will not have that feature. And it's open source, which means saying yes. You put it up there, people make their own version. Maybe it's good. Maybe you pull that change back in. Maybe it's something you hadn't thought of, some concern that never occurred to you, but happens to be really important, maybe for some local reason in Asia. Or if you're mapping very dense cities and you don't live in a dense city, so you didn't think about that. That's what open source is all about. And it's what OpenStreetMap is all about. Everything changes really fast. So here's ID, an editor that, to my mind, manages to address that. It's going to remember me this time. Super, super simple. You've got a map, you've got something telling you to zoom in, and you've got some very basic controls. So, if you go over and look at where all this mapping is happening now, you can just get in there, and let's say I think that this forest actually extends a little bit further there and a little bit further there. It's not hard. It's a map. You change the map has changed. It's about tightening that loop. Leibniz said this thing that I really love. As far as the unwritten knowledge dispersed among people of different professions, I believe it much exceeds in quantity and importance all that we find in books, and that the better part of our treasure is not yet recorded. There's all this knowledge in people's heads, and we can put this in a shared space. We just have to have such a low threshold to engagement that people don't stop and say, maybe not today. They visit somewhere, they go on OpenStreetMap, and they put that on the map. Just opening a bunch of tabs today. So here we are in Pakistan, and the earthquake a couple of months ago brought up this enormous mud island. Not enormous even, this mud island in the bay here. And while the news stories were still debating whether it existed, someone went and found an authoritative source. They found aerial photos. They could compare it to the shoreline. They mapped it. Now it's on the map, right? We can. It's not even in the satellite imagery. Someone named it. Someone gave its name in Polish. They made a note because there was, this potential for dispute, right? It's ridiculously well documented. I can't remember exactly when the earthquake was, but I remember checking it. It was 6 hours later. They were just like, oh, there's new land. I'll put it on the map. And, it's a mud island, right? So it's gonna sink again. It's not gonna last. It's gonna get washed away. So it'll move from the map. Because a map has to change, because the world changes, right? We've got climate change, we've got we've got construction, we've got earthquakes. It's this moving thing, and then on top of that, everything people do changes the map somehow. So we have a map not just of space, but of time. This week, we've seen an example of that is really depressing in some ways, but also really, really inspiring. We've seen this amazing surge of support for OpenStreetMap, and especially the humanitarian OpenStreetMap team, HOT. So our data artist, Eric Fisher, just rendered this today. And these are just changes in the last 5 days. Everything, so this is the map, right, turned down. But everything that's highlighted here, that's all new. None of this was on the map 5 days ago. But these people heard, they got the HOT activation. They were like, they need maps, we'll make maps. If they need to know which highways are out, we'll put the highways on the map so they can mark that. All new. I could stare at this all day. I just love that this kind of complicated, ambitious project can be made to work. All those streets, all those houses. Someone had already gone in there and done a lot of the beforehand stuff. So that, I don't know, that kind of made my year. That kind of reminded me like why I'm involved. This has also shown up some difficulties. It was just about exactly a week ago that the hurricane hit. It was Friday morning in the Philippines. We knew beforehand that it was going to be a huge, huge hurricane. We had a pretty good track prediction. We knew when and where there was going to be a humanitarian disaster, right? Like I have a Filipino friend who was talking on Twitter before it hit, and he was like, I'm super worried about my family in like these particular cities because there's this enormous hurricane that's coming. You know, this wasn't a surprise. And yet, we're just now getting maps that we can trace and that we can use, which is especially frustrating because this data exists. So I can go here to this system, the sole purpose of which is to put out data of humanitarian value, right, that takes like commercial imagery and government imagery and gives it to people who can use it to save lives. That's what this is for. And it mostly works, but here I am. I'm logged in. Go to download. And the actual pixels are restricted. Now you're saying, but Charlie, you're just some guy. And I say, oh, but I put in a request. And the request said, like, the Red Cross is working on this. I'm working to support them. I understand that there might be licensing issues. I'm not going to release this without permission. I would just like to download these pixels so I can start processing them in anticipation of using them for mapping. Put the request in, haven't heard back yet. But you're like, okay, but Charlie, you work for a private company. You know, you're just some guy. You could have been lying in your request. So this guy is basically in charge of this at the Red Cross, and here he is on Twitter asking the government to approve his application. To say, okay, give me, like, yes, you can have that data. You, the Red Cross, days after this disaster, can have the pixels. I don't think that's satisfactory. Now, this is changing. The fact that this program exists, right, that I can go here at all, that someone invented this and is trying to make it work, that's a really, really good sign, and that's progress. And, you know, like I in a way, I can't complain. There are also people who are pushing really hard for this, like Josh, who we're going to hear from next. But this is an enormous system. It's kind of dysfunctional, and that hurts people. So this is, some of you will recognize this and some of you won't. This is the results from a download. I was pulling in some commercial imagery, which I didn't have a license to use for humanitarian purposes yet, but I was processing in hopes that they would realize that they could save lives by letting us do this. I pulled it down, 1.2 gigabytes in 2 hours. So for comparison, I was following along with Juan's GeoGit demo, right? So I'm going to pull London, right? Just like he showed, right? I don't know if you can see that on the screen. My Java install is broken. Everyone's is. Don't worry about it. And it's going to sit there and put itself together and start pulling OpenStreetMap data. Here it comes. Now I can go over here and I can look on my little network pane here, right? And I'm getting 2-3 megabytes per second. Okay, and this is not special fancy wireless, right? This is just the wireless at a talk, right? 3.1. So that's roughly 20 times as fast as I could get data from a major satellite company. These people have $500 million computers with state-of-the-art optics. They can put them in space. It's wonderful. It's a miracle. And then I download it at 160 kilobytes per second. Sorry, I'm exaggerating. Almost 170 kilobytes per second. That's slower than their satellite splats the data down to the ground from hundreds of miles in the air to the station like near the North Pole, right? Like they can get the data from space to the ground faster than they can get it from a server to me, right? Now, you can go to Amazon and you can say, Amazon, I would like an S3 account. And Amazon will give you an account that on the same connection that I downloaded this, will let you download it 10 or 20 megabytes per second. So like 100 times as fast. The infrastructure is embarrassing. It's amazing that it took us a week to get the data that we did. This is not to downplay the efforts of the people who are working really, really hard on this, right? Like, I'm really grateful that the various companies and agencies came through. That was, they didn't have to do that, they did, that was good. A week, though. So I remember a volunteer telling me once that the rule of thumb is you can survive 4 minutes without air, you can survive 4 days without water, you can survive 4 weeks without food. But that goes down if you're very young, if you're very old, if you're working hard. For example, if you're helping your neighbor clean up after a hurricane because their roof caved in and they don't have anywhere to sleep. I understand that these are really hard issues, right? Like I can walk around and say all data should be open, or at least, you know, like they should give it to us quickly if we pay. And it's not that easy, right? There are technical problems, there are security problems. It's really difficult. But I'm sure that in 2013, we can do better. I think that this is a cultural problem as much as a technical problem, but it is also a technical problem. And technology and culture can leapfrog each other. You can show someone a tool, a technological tool, that embodies a way of thinking and inspire them to think about doing things in a slightly more effective way, and vice versa. You can talk to someone making a tool and you can say, hey, what if we made this more distributed? What if we made this more personal? What if we made this easier to learn? And we can leapfrog each other like that. Thank you.